All right, let's get right into it. Today, we're tearing down this really provocative new field manual from an author named Khaled Al-Mahdi. And, this isn't your typical self-help book. Not at all. It's more like a stark architectural blueprint for our times. And it kicks off with a premise that's designed to really shake you up.
I mean, look at this. Right from the jump, the author uses this metaphor to frame everything he sees going wrong in society. His whole argument is that our problems, they're not about culture or politics. No, he says they're structural. We've basically stopped being builders, and now we just talk about the rot.
So what does he even mean by structural? Well, according to Al-Mahdi, we're not looking at a crisis of values or morals. He thinks we're facing a crisis of physics. Yeah, you heard that right. A thermodynamic crisis. It's a pretty wild idea, so let's unpack what that actually means.
And you have to get this, he's not being metaphorical here, he means it, like literally. Al-Mahdi is arguing that we have a real shortage of people who create tangible things, people who actually manipulate atoms, and a huge surplus of people who just process the vibe of the decay. They're just talking about it.
Okay, so to make this whole philosophy click, the author introduces these two central figures, these two archetypes that he says define everyone's role in this whole mess. You're either a builder or you're a processor.
And this slide just lays it out perfectly, right? The core difference. On one side, you've got the builder. This is the person who reduces disorder, who manipulates actual reality. Writing code, pouring concrete. They carry the load. Then on the other side, you've got the processor. They're all about the atmosphere, the feelings, the vibes, the endless discussions. And in the author's view, they're actually exporting disorder for someone else to clean up.
So, it all boils down to this one key metric he calls the entropy delta. See, for this author, your value isn't about your good intentions or how you feel. It's about your net impact on disorder in the universe, period. Are you creating order or are you creating chaos? He thinks that is the only question that actually matters.
And this chart, wow, this really visualizes his whole house is falling argument. He claims that back in 1950 you had 10 builders for every one processor. 10 to 1. But by 2026, he is predicting it'll be 0.3 builders for every processor. The whole thing is flipped on its head. And a system with a ratio like that, he says it's just thermodynamically impossible. It can't hold.
Okay, so this is all great as a big idea, but how does it actually work in the real world? What's the operating system for one of these builders? Well, let's take a look at how they interact with reality, starting with one of the author's rules about something as basic as friendship.
He has this quote, "A real friend is someone who wants the best version of you more than they want the comfortable version of you." And this is where he makes this really sharp distinction between what he calls load-bearing friendships and, get this, friendships that are just emotional dialysis machines. One gives you actual structural support. The other just gives you, well, atmospheric comfort.
And he actually gives you a way to audit your own friendships. Like, ask yourself, do they help you solve actual structural problems? Are they moving up in their own lives? Do they tell you the hard truths, or do they just validate your feelings over and over? He argues that builders don't just happen to find friends, they actively curate what he calls a sovereign field, a whole network of people who are optimized for getting stuff done.
And, this whole idea of auditing your life, it definitely doesn't stop with your friends. The author then turns that lens right back on you, giving you a set of tools to diagnose your own structural integrity.
And it all starts with this one foundational question. What have you actually built? He draws this hard line between what he calls the emotional house, your feelings, your personal journey, your self-awareness, and the atomic house, which is the cold, hard, tangible reality you've actually built around yourself.
And this chart really shows what he sees as completely screwed up priorities. He argues that any dying system, and that could be a person, a company, or a whole civilization, spends something like 80% of its energy on just decoration, the atmospheric stuff, and only 5%, just 5%, on its actual foundation. It's just completely upside down. So to fight against that trend, he offers this sovereign house audit, and man, it is a brutally practical checklist. This has nothing to do with how you feel. It's all about what you can actually do. Do you control your own housing? Can you generate your own power for 72 hours? Do you have a month's worth of food? It takes this abstract idea of being a builder and makes it tangible and, brutally measurable.
So, where is all of this going? Well, the author builds everything up to this climax. This concept he calls the rupture. And that's his term for a societal breaking point,
where all the safety nets, all the atmospheric comforts we take for granted, are just suddenly gone.
And this quote, this might be the single bluntest line in the entire book. His point is that when a real crisis finally hits, the only things that are going to matter are your actual, tangible skills and the resilient structures you've built. All that atmospheric work, in his view, it becomes completely and totally irrelevant.
And here you see the two paths, the predicted outcomes. When that societal scaffolding finally gives way, the builder falls back on the sovereign house they built. They adapt, they thrive. But the processor, the one who relied on institutions and social validation, that all evaporates, and they're left with nothing to stand on. They just collapse under the strain.
So really, the whole point of this entire manual just boils down to this one single choice. It's a binary. Are you building atomic reality, manipulating matter to create order, or are you just getting lost in the atmospheric noise of the decay? And for this author, there is absolutely no middle ground. And so, we're not going to end with a tidy little summary. Instead, we'll leave you with the author's final challenging question, one that's aimed right at you. Are you building your house, or just processing its decay? It's a pretty provocative thought to sit with, forcing you to look at your own life through this, well, this very stark and unforgiving lens.